Colleagues, both here and on the line, I'd like to call the 8th meeting of the SPPC meeting and advise those who are here from streaming capabilities to anyone else that has been able to communicate through to the Council that the City of London is committed to making every effort to provide alternate formats and communication supports for Council, standing or advisory committees, and information upon request. To make a request for any city service, contact accessibility@london.ca or 519-661-2489, extension 2425. And to make a specific request to this meeting, please contact sppc@london.ca. So colleagues, I think you know the format. We've been through a council meeting through this and certainly a committee meeting. What I have here is I have 11 of our colleagues who are on the line and 4 who are here around the horseshoe with several of our staff in-house and the balance on the line. So what we'll ask you to do, please, is that as we have, as you wish to speak, you'll note that there is a raise hand and it will show up in the appropriate order. And then I'm advised that if you want, that when you're done, to lower your hand, and otherwise, as per, we will carry on with you until your hand is lowered, as it were, and we'll go through the order that we have as voting, as we've done in the past. We will accommodate the colleagues that are around the table through electronic voting, and then go in ward order, starting with Councillor Van Holst, and end with the de-bearded Councillor Hillier. So we'll do it that way and work from there. Any questions about that for now? Seeing none, then I will look for any disclosures of pecuniary interest. Seeing none, thank you. We have one item on the consent agenda, 2.1, governance requirements and recommendations, London and Middlesex housing, community housing. It is on the consent agenda. I will ask if there's someone that's willing to move that. Councillor Lehman. Do I have to volume that up? And seconded by Councillor Lewis. Thank you. Any comments or discussion? Councillor Squire.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair, and through you. I just want to understand sort of where we're going on this particular board because of its importance to relevance to our housing plans moving forward. The one sentence that confused me was, it was in the overview and recommendation, says the tenure of this interim board is recommended to continue until such time as the board determines or recommends to the shareholder when and if revised composition is needed. The reason I'm concerned about that is it seems to be saying to the board as is that it's gonna be coming back to the shareholder at some point with some kind of a recommendation. And it's not clear to me if that's a recommendation for a board as previously constituted with 2 council members. Is it a board with no council members? Is it a smaller board? Because it goes on to say that it is recognized that the original board of LMCH included both community representatives as well as a representative from both the Council of the City of London as well as the County of Middlesex. So it doesn't say directly, we're going to get back to that format where there's political representation and community representation. So if I could, through you, Mr. Chair, get some clarity on this issue. I know there's an upcoming motion, but I'm trying to fit this together.
I wonder if I could ask Ms. Dietersbeer to respond to that, please.
Thank you through the chair. The intention of that information is to give you a sense that the board and the work that they will be doing would come back to you as the shareholder to make a recommendation. The current articles of incorporation for the organization speak to there being a community board, that there being representation from city and county council. I do believe as the board currently and as the managing director that there's good value in looking at a community board or elements of a community board moving forward. There's lots of work to be done with this organization and they do work within the community, and there are options I think for you to consider as a shareholder and as council about community representation, and certainly representation from councils of both organizations.
Councillor Squire.
So can I take it from that because it's still not clear to me. So is it possible that the future board contemplated or recommended to the shareholder by yourself as the current board may be of a different type than our previous board, meaning less, more community representation, and even a change to the number of councillors who sit on the board? I just want to understand what is on the table at this point in time.
Ms. Dieter-Spear.
Thank you through the chair. What's on the table at this point in time is to replace the current interim board with another interim board. In the future, it is possible that the interim board could come back and recommend that you go back to a board that looks like you had before. That's consistent with what's in your within the Articles of Incorporation. That does include community representation and council representation. That's an option. I think what I'm trying to say to you is that the new interim board would come back to you with a recommendation moving forward. The use of the interim board concept is to indicate to you that at some point in time, the shareholder will make a decision about what the board will be for the future and hopefully for a permanent board moving forward.
Councillor Squire, are you good with that for now?
Not good with it, but I heard it.
So noted. Thank you. Councillor Van Holst.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And through you, I appreciate the comments of Councillor Squire. I think I would like to see some council recommendation, even on the interim board. I realize why we need to create a new interim board. It's going to have a number of, it's suggested a number of staff members be on it. However, I don't think it's up to staff to decide which councillor should be on that board. That's something that we would have to decide when their recommendation comes back for a new interim board. But I'll certainly be looking to see that it has some representation from our body. Thank you.
Thank you. I have Councillor Turner, Councillor Hopkins, Councillor Cassidy. Councillor Turner, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So through you, just have a couple questions. One, in the recommendation, it identifies the manager of housing services is recommended to be an ex officio member. I think in our terms, the ex officio is considered to be a voting member. I think the mayor is ex officio to all the standing committees, for example, is permitted to be as a voting member. Is the intent here to provide that staff member as a voting member of this board?
Let's ask that question. Ms. Dieter-Spear.
Thank you through the chair. It was initially intended to be that, but further to the comments that Councillor Turner has brought forward, we'd be coming back with a recommendation about whether that would be ex officio or whether that would just be a support to the board. Certainly, I think it would be the latter, and we would change that in your recommendation coming back to you next week.
Yeah. Thank you. I appreciate that through you, Your Worship. I think that's probably the more appropriate avenue is to have them as a resource member to the board. I did have a question. Perhaps it's a little tangential to this, though. In this this period where we have a transition of governance as well as a transition of leadership within the corporation itself, and concurrently all this stuff that's happening with COVID, what's happening in order to support CMA or LMHC or LMCH during this period, especially with respect to perhaps increased environmental cleaning, social supports within the organization? I'd imagine this is going to need a fairly intensive wraparound of care and support through the next couple of months.
Ms. Dieter-Spear.
Through the chair, I have been, as the board of LMCH and also as the managing director, actively involved in supporting LMCH during this period of time. We talk daily, we meet regularly. They receive information from the city with respect to the city's response to initiatives, whether it's to how we support staff. I can be clear with you that the Housing Corporation has taken many measures to secure and safeguard their tenants. That includes cleaning within their buildings. That also includes providing supports to tenants. It also includes providing supports as it relates to payment of rent. I think that the agency is doing its best it can, like we all are, in terms of trying to ferret through this reality. I think moving forward, they will continue to do that. They understand their core delivery and service is providing supports to tenants as it relates to housing.
Thank you. And through your worship, one final is, are there any additional supports or measures that council can take to help support through this period for LMC?
Ms. Deardsmere?
Through the chair, thank you for the question. They've been working very hard and they're certainly appreciative of the funding you provided to them through the multi-year budget. They're starting to look at what their reality looks like moving forward. And I think at some point in time, should they need additional resources as it looks like money, they may come back to you. But right now, I think they feel well supported. We'll start to know over the next number of weeks about the changes in rental revenue and what impact that will have, as there's an impact for the city as well when rental revenue at LMCH is reduced.
Councillor? Thanks very much. Councillor Hopkins?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. And I really appreciate the comments from my colleagues as well, because it really leads to the motion that I would like to bring forward. And I understand I have a seconder in Councillor Calabaga as well. So if I may, Mr. Mayor, just present the motion and the reason, and I'll just go through the motion. We are going to be receiving this report, but in clause B, we are going to be directing to bring forward for consideration to council at a meeting held April the 7th, a recommended slate of board members of LMCH, and also to direct a special strategic priorities policy meeting as well to approve that slate. And one of the reasons why I would like to bring this forward and the importance is the need, given the crisis, the pandemic that we're under, but also the need that we have an interim board established sooner than later. We are looking at a number of changes, and this motion will bring it forward sooner than later, looking at the end of the month or maybe even going into May, to have an established board, an interim board. I understand Councillor Squire's concerns and questions. I had a number of them as well, but establishing the board and given the work that needs to be done, I think having that security for now with 3 members, and then taking a look at how we move forward. We know we have about 5,000 tenants. We know we have about 3,300 or so units that need to be maintained. And we also have a report that's coming to us too, that we have requested quarterly reports coming to us with the information that we're going to need, so we can address all the other questions like how long this interim board may last. But the importance of having something established sooner than later is important given the work and the challenges that need to be addressed now. So I'm hoping to get my colleagues to support this motion.
Thank you, Councillor Hopkins. Now, we had a motion on the floor that had been moved and seconded, and I acknowledge that what you have here is something that would effectively replace or amend the motion that is on the floor. I'd like to, we've had some discussion already as it relates to this, so what I'm going to ask is if the mover and seconder might be comfortable working with the amended motion that is there, and that was moved by, give me the original, Councillors Lehman and Lewis. Councillor Lehman, are you comfortable with this, and this will be our discussion, the amended motion? Councillor Lehman?
Well, I just want to, and I'm not too sure where the proper time is to raise this. I just want to hear from staff to make sure that they have enough time to produce this slate. You know, this is not just for the next 2 weeks. It's, you know, it's a bit of time and very, as you know, has been mentioned, a very important circumstances. So I guess I'd like to hear from staff to kind of weigh in on the comfort factor of them to get a slate to us by that date that's been moved up.
Thanks for the question. Let's start with Ms. Livingston for some initial response, please.
Thank you, and through the chair, yes, that gives us enough time. It achieves a second goal as well, that we would be able to have a period of training and transition for the new interim board members prior to the departure of Ms. Datersbeer. That is a concern from my perspective, that people can assume the duties and understand their roles and functions while we still have a very knowledgeable expert in our midst. Thank you.
Thank you. Let me, I know that was an inquiry, and you may wish to come in, Councillor Lehman, with some questions as it relates to this, so you still have the floor. And then Deputy Mayor Helmer.
Okay, that answers my concern. So from my perspective, I'm willing to accept that friendly amendment.
Looks like it's been acknowledged by your seconder. Let's go to Deputy Mayor Helmer, please.
Well, I just wanted to thank Councillor Hopkins and Councillor Kayabaga for bringing that forward. I think getting an interim board in place earlier is a good idea, and I support that direction.
Thank you. I see that Councillor Lehman, you still have your hand up, so put your hand down for God's sakes. Thank you. Any other comments or questions from colleagues? Councillor Lewis.
Thank you, Mayor Holder. Really, this is probably more of a procedural question through you to our clerk staff, I would guess, but wherever it needs to go. I'm just reading the Part C, following the municipal council meeting held on that date to consider and approve the slate. Why would we not hold the special SPPC prior to the municipal council meeting so that we can then ratify that in a more timely manner?
Let's refer that to the clerk.
Through Mr. Mayor, that is because council would need to approve the recommendation from today's meeting before we had another SPC. So it's all timing. What comes first?
Thank you. Any other comments or questions? Councillor Squire.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, I'll support this, but the understanding that I have is this is going to be that interim board. My interest, and I think I made that clear, is really on what we look at for a permanent board. And as far as I'm concerned, the sooner the later. Council representation is good and community representation is good. And I just raise that because it's important to me.
So you said the sooner the better. Better. I thought you said the sooner the later. That was perhaps my ears, and I'm only 6 feet from you. Other comments or questions? The clerk wants to clarify.
Mr. Mayor, it would be helpful for the public if, before you vote, if I was able to read the motion out in full.
I think Councillor Hopkins did a pretty good job to start, but why don't you take it through, and that way that will bring clarity. Thank you.
That on the recommendation of the Managing Director, Housing, Social Services and Dearness Home, and concurrently the Board, London and Middlesex Community Housing, LMCH, the following actions be taken with respect to the governance requirements of LMCH. A, the staff report dated March 31st, 2020, entitled Governance Requirements and Recommendations, London and Middlesex Community Housing, be received. B, the Managing Director, Housing and Social Services and Dearness Home be directed to bring forward for consideration to the Municipal Council meeting to be held on April 7th, 2020, a recommended slate of board of members of LMCH. And C, the City Clerk be directed to make the necessary arrangements to hold a meeting of the shareholders of LMCH at a special Strategic Priorities and Policy Committee meeting on April 7th, 2020, following the Municipal Council meeting held that date, to consider and approve the Municipal Council's recommended slate of board of members of LMCH.
Thanks very much. I have Councillor Cassidy. You're on, Councillor Cassidy.
Thank you. I also want to thank Councillor Kayabaga and Councillor Hopkins for bringing this forward. I was a little bit worried as well if we were pushing staff too far and too fast, and so I'm glad Councillor Lehman and Councillor Lewis asked that question about Ms. Livingston answered it the way she did. So I think we have to find the appropriate balance of moving as quickly as possible, but not too fast. We want to get this right. We want the right remedy in place, and I don't think speed at all cost is the answer. So I think this is the right balance, and I'll support it.
Thank you. Councillor Morgan.
Yes, thank you, Your Worship. I'll be supportive of this. It sounds to me like this is the motion on the floor now. I'm just kind of reviewing it from home. So I understand that Councillor Lehman and Lewis put something on the floor. They were willing to accept the proposed amendments from Councillor Hopkins, Kaibaga, and as the clerk put it forward, is the way that we're potentially voting on. So it's not an amendment, it's just the main motion, is my understanding. And I'm supportive of it. I particularly like the way Ms. Livingston articulated it, solving two particular issues, and so our staff are supportive of it. I also think for those colleagues who want to ensure that we have control over the appointments of this board, I think that's very clear in this motion that it's the Managing Director of Housing and Social Services in Dearness Home will be directed to bring forward for consideration to Municipal Council a recommended slate, but it is still fully our ability to debate, consider, and make decisions on that slate and take action at that time. So I'm supportive of that particular direction. It's a very important corporation to the city. It's going through a very important time in its history, and we've made historic supporting investments financially. We need to get the governance piece right. And it sounds like everybody's on the same page on this. So we'll look forward to voting when the appropriate time comes.
Thank you, Councillor Morgan, and to acknowledge this is the main motion. So any other comments or questions with respect to this? Councillor Hopkins, are you looking to make a comment, please?
If I may, Mr. Mayor, and a quick question to staff as well. I appreciate Ms. Livingston's comments, taking into account the expertise. That's sort of the reason, one of the other reasons to bring this forward sooner than later. But I am also interested in knowing how this conversation is going to go forward. This is an interim board. So will first of all, when will the quarterly report be coming to us, and would that be the appropriate time as we receive these reports to have further discussions as to what the future board would look like? That is a question.
Thanks very much. Taken as such. I wonder if I could ask Ms. Dietersbeer some thoughts on that.
Sure. Through the chair, the second quarterly report will be at the CAPS committee meeting on April 28th. So you'll have a sense at that point in time the work that's being done. Obviously, there have been some changes at LMCH over the last number of months, including changes in leadership. And having said that, though, the organization is committed to moving forward on many of the activities that it's engaging in, whether it's the new funding that's been received for the multi-year budget, and also its emphasis on ensuring it's addressing its vacancy issues. So we'll be able to provide you with more information at that point in time. With respect to that report, it is intended to give you a full overview of what's happening in the broader housing piece. It will also, I can tell you as of today, provide you with an overview of what's happening as it relates to COVID. I guess in terms of the board and the structure of the board, those are questions or it's information that you as a council sitting as a shareholder can deal with either at a separate shareholder meeting or potentially a shareholder meeting now or in the future, but it wouldn't be necessarily part of that report coming forward.
Councillor Hopkins?
Yes, thank you for that clarification. And thank you very much, Ms. Dietersbeer, for the work that you've been doing on behalf of London Middlesex Community Housing as well.
Thank you. I'll keep comments or questions open as anyone would like to add. Seeing none, again, let me add my thanks to Councillors Hopkins and Kaibaga for their contribution to this. That's very important. As we call the question. And I will now go in ward order. Councillor Van Holst.
Yay.
Councillor Salee. Councillor Salee. Councillor Helmer.
Yay. Ward 3 says yes. Sorry.
It's always nice to hear from Ward 3. Thank you. Councillor Cassidy.
Yes.
Thank you. Councillor Morgan.
Yay.
Councillor Lehman.
Yay.
Councillor Hopkins.
Yay.
Councillor Turner.
Yay.
Councillor Pelosa.
Yes.
Councillor Kayabaga.
Yay.
Councillor Hillier.
Yay.
Closing the vote and the motion carries 15-0.
Thank you, colleagues, and thank you, Ms. Datersbeer, for the work on this, and Ms. Livingston for your responses as well. Very helpful. I have no scheduled items nor items for direction or deferred matters or additional business, but we do have bear with me just a moment. Sorry, it's always a little bit hard. I see Deputy Mayor Helmer has his wants to be acknowledged. Please go ahead, Deputy Mayor.
Thank you, colleagues. In anticipating that we might have some questions about how COVID-19 is impacting the city's workforce, and especially how it might impact labor relations and matters that we discussed in closed session, I thought we'd add an additional reason so we could go in closed session to discuss those things today.
Thank you very much. And as we consider moving to closed session now, Clerk, do you have anything you wanted to add to that?
Your Worship, I'd be happy to read out the additional reason that Deputy Mayor Helmer was referring to if you want.
I think that would be valuable, please.
A matter pertaining to reports, advice, and recommendations of officers and employees of the corporation concerning labor relations and employee negotiations in regards to one or more of the corporation's unions and communications necessary for that purpose pertaining to COVID-19 related matters.
Thank you very much. I'll look for a mover to go into confidential session. Councillor Lewis, seconded by Councillor Van Meerbergen. I'll turn your attention to the screen. And I will also do the call. Councillor Van Holst.
Yay.
Councillor Salee.
Yes.
Deputy Mayor Helmer.
Yay.
Councillor Cassidy.
Yes.
Councillor Morgan.
Yay.
Councillor Lehman.
Yay.
Councillor Hopkins.
Yay.
Councillor Turner.
Yay.
Councillor Pelosa.
Yay.
Councillor Kayabaga.
Yay.
Councillor Hillier.
Yay.
Closing the vote and the motion carries 15-0.
Colleagues, I'll just ask for your forbearance for a moment as we have the appropriate individuals in this session.